Oh, there you are. You ever sleep and don't feel like you slept at all? Join me today for a episode on sleep. Okay, I gotta go back to sleep. See you later. Bye.
Today is our next episode in the Chronicles of Sleep. And I'd like to thank Dr. Sanjiv Patel for joining us, a dedicated sleep specialist, critical care, and pulmonologist who's taken out time from his busy schedule to talk to us. We're going to dwell further on sleep today, and in this episode, talk about sleep hygiene. No, it's not what you think. So stay tuned with what we're going to talk about. In addition to that, we're going to talk about the complications that arise due to lack of sleep and if the melatonin supplements work for a sound sleep. Welcome back, everyone. I have the pleasure tonight of having one of my good friends from Denver who practiced with me as a pulmonologist and sleep physician while I was a cardiac surgeon in Denver. And he is going to talk to us today a little bit about sleep, because that's what he does. And that's something which we all need more of. Now you're ready to go to bed. You got to practice sleep hygiene. That's what they were telling me, right? Tell me about sleep hygiene, meaning a dark room, good temperature, comfortable. So you go through it. You're the expert.
Yeah, so sleep hygiene is kind of a group of things we tell people about. What are some good habits we can create to try to get better quality sleep? Okay. And one of the things we want to do is we want to be in the right mind place to go to bed. So typically what happens for most of us is we're so busy, we're trying to get the kids ready for bed, we're trying to get them ready for the next day, we're doing our work, we're doing all these other things, and then we think we're just going to lay down right in our bed and fall asleep. And your mind is running with so many different thoughts. Well, what we really need to do is you create the mind space saying, it's my time now to relax and meditate. Meditation, you and I talked about meditation before.
Yep.
A great thing to do before bed, even doing stretches and things to get your brain ready to say, it's time to shut out the day. The day is over. Now is my time to rest and relax. And that's hard to do, but those are habits to build. But we tell people, look, find things that are relaxing to do before bed, but we want to avoid light. Light, when that hits our eyes, it hits a part of our brain so melatonin is a chemical you were talking about earlier that releases, that helps us to fall asleep and tells the brain it's sleep time. Well, light suppresses melatonin. It keeps melatonin from being excreted, especially that blue light. That's that high energy wavelength. And so if you're watching TV when you're trying to go to bed, or you're looking at your iPhone or iPad, that light is telling your brain, don't secrete melatonin, don't be ready for bed, it's daytime. Okay, so one of the big things we tell people is try to get away from things. I always recommend patients listen to music, something relaxing, because music is great. You can relax, shut your eyes, calm, do those kind of, be in the right mind space to think about and reflect on the day a little bit, but then also start to relax. If you're going to read, go to an old traditional book. I think we've all lost the art of reading books, and I personally like having a book in my hands. I miss it,
I do too, and don't do it often.
And so, but if you can't get a book, because again, it's indirect light. It's not light coming directly at your eyes to help stay awake. One of the big things we tell people to do is especially COVID has made this worse, is now that people are working from home so much more, they're now taking their laptop into their bed. And they're doing work in their bed. They're doing all these different things, watching TV. So what your brain says is, my bed is where I do work. I do all these other things. We want the bed to be a place where you sleep. So we tell people, do all that stuff somewhere else.
So the fortress of solitude. And I agree with that 100%. In fact, to the point where you don't want to put a TV in your sleep room. You put all your phones, devices somewhere else. You don't even put a computer there. And that has to be your fortress of solitude. Because the points you brought up are absolutely bang on, that if you want to sleep well every night, and that's the key, right? You don't have that. And I don't know about you, I think we went through the same period, but I had that doggone pager on top of my newborn, and the two of us couldn't exist. So I usually got put in the other room, but the amount of interrupted sleep during call was so phenomenal that you had a sleep debt that was pronounced. And it made your life miserable. You started doing stuff. What are the complications of not getting enough sleep?
So, there's several studies that show that even getting one night of sleep less, okay, interrupting sleep for one night can have a measurable effect on you the next day. It reduces your awareness, it reduces your memory, your concentration, your ability to do tasks. It makes you more irritable. Okay. So it can affect all those things, even with just one night of sleep disruptions, so we know how critical sleep is. And that's what you were talking earlier about. When we stay up for exams, we talk about memory and allocation. Well, we also talk about, well, if you don't sleep well, your concentration level is going to go down. The same task, you'll make more mistakes and take longer to do.
And it's conceivable that if you're studying, you won't allocate that memory. So your retention will and your recall will not be on the same level if you don't have your sleep. So the idea of cramming at the end never made sense to me because it stressed you out anyway. But then on top of that, because you were sleepless, the real question is, could it really help you with the exam itself?
Well, and you have two blocks of memory, right? You have this ultra short memory area, think of it like RAM on your computer, and then you've got that hard drive that things you entrench in. Well, when you study and get good sleep, you put that into the place where it's really good memory. And if you try to cram in the last minute, you tend to actually push out some of the other things you've learned to try to retain that little bit you learned just that middle of the night. So you're absolutely right. We tell people try to work every day getting good sleep and work in chunks versus trying to get everything last minute. And I tell it's amazing when we talk to a lot of, business professionals, and we tell them on projects, look, most of us have learned to stay up until the project is done and then you go to bed. So what I tell them is look, if you do that, the project will take longer and you'll make more mistakes. You're better going to bed, attacking the project the next day, and you'll do it faster with less mistakes.
Very sound advice.
And that's hard. We don't think of it that way, but that's, again, making sleep a priority, but affecting sleep, even short term, even just 1 hour reduction of sleep has sizable changes in what we do. And then when you do it chronically, not only do we get the mental issues with it, it can start to affect the cardiovascular system. Studies have shown people get more colds and more infections because their immune system goes down. We have more inflammation. We have more joint issues, pain issues. So then the body starts to feel, so the brain feels effects very quickly and the body feels it with long-term sleep deprivation.
I've also heard that it can affect your weight. You can gain significant amounts of weight. You can also have basically overall tiredness and mood changes, depression, all sorts of crazy stuff. Now, let's turn our attention to what can you do if you're not sleeping well. And one excellent example is with jet lag. Is there a quick cure? Because this will go trendy. And I've seen the studies on melatonin, which is naturally occurring, but the supplemental melatonin, which you take every single day. What's your thought on that? Does melatonin work?
It can, but the key with melatonin is the timing of it. And there's actually several sites online that can kind of show you based on where you're flying to and where you're going to arrive and what timings, when you can take the melatonin. So actually some of the data on jet lag is with melatonin and light. Okay, so the combination of the two. So what we'll do is, depending on if people are flying East Coast or West, depending if they're going back or forward in their time zone, we'll actually recommend that they try to take the melatonin at a certain time and actually try to either put on special glasses to block out light or be exposed to a very bright light. And depending on which way they travel, we'll give them the timing of that exposure. So there's actually a fair amount of data that either putting on glasses to block light or exposing to a bright light added with melatonin can help with jet lag and reduce how quickly you feel it. The best thing that people can do is, if you have the luxury of time, is to start to sleep closer to what the time zone you're going to and acclimate much quicker.
Yep.
Previously people have been taking prescription sleeping pills and medications, and we're always worried about doing that, because again, the sleep you get is not good sleep. And we've seen several cases of people, I'll tell you a story of, I was on my honeymoon and we were flying to Greece, and they had called to see if there was a physician on board, because the patient was trying to fly to Greece and he basically passed out in the bathroom because he took 2 sleeping pills, prescription sleeping pills, sold with them.
Wow.
And ended up being sick at the same time. And he basically had his breathing slowed down. He had a medical emergency, and I basically tended to him for the whole flight. My poor wife had to fly by herself on her honeymoon, where I was in the back with a patient, and we actually took him out in an ambulance once we landed in Greece, in Athens. So people are having medical issues. There's several reported cases of people taking a sleeping pill in the holding area of a plane and have fallen asleep before they actually got on the plane and actually missed their flight. So
I would say the key is quite interesting, that taking the Ativan or taking some of the other things is not going to give you the type of sleep which has REM and all the normal things. The second part of it is the light and dark state. So if you're flying a long distance, like you're coming to India or you're going from India to the US, it's a very long flight if you could do it continuous. And the idea of wearing those blinders they give you in the packets is not a bad one, actually. Alcohol and all the other things don't help you, is what I've read.
No. Yeah,
Right?
and that can make it worse because, again, like some of those medications you described, they can suppress the REM sleep, and the sleep they get you is bad quality. So even once you land, not on top of the jet lag you have, the sleep you got was such poor quality, you feel like you're even more sleep deprived.
Right.
But it's interesting about the light thing because some of the bigger airlines companies, both Boeing and Airbus, have looked at on these long haul flights. They're starting to create LED lighting that actually changes during the flight to mimic that sunrise, sunset, and mimic where you're landing to kind of help with that. So there's a big recognition and how important light is, And I'm a big proponent about paying attention to the light. One of the things I'll bring up is, now that LEDs are so easy to get, they're really pretty universally available. One of the things to pay attention to is, well, what kind of LED are you getting? What I mean by that is we use something called a Kelvin scale of how warm the temperature is.
Yep.
And most of the lights we're all used to are what's called the 2700 Kelvin. They almost look like candlelight, but that mimics sunset. So it tends to cause more eye strain. It tends to feel more gloomy. But if you can get bulbs that are what's called 4,000 or 5,000 bright light or bright white, they tend to be almost a brighter white or almost blue. There's actually some data during the daytime in offices where you may not have a window available that can help people produce better, they work better, and their mood is better because they don't feel like they're so trapped in without seeing that sunlight. Sunlight's such an important part of how our brain functions.
This is something for you guys. I live in the tropics now, and so there's a lot of sun. But I remember those cold days in St. Louis where you would have 4 months of eternal darkness because you would go to work early in the morning when it was dark, and you would come home by 4 or 5 p.m. when it was dark as well. And so I think that's a topic for another day with sunlight therapy, but it fits into the same thing, that your sleep-wake cycle is critically related to the 24-hour cycle. And it's something which is evolutionarily put into place so that you wake up and you go to sleep at the same time every day. And it's also in conjunction with the fact that it's light and it's dark. So even if you were to go to sleep when it's dark and you leave your curtains on, so when the light comes, from what I've read, if you've slept well, then you should not need an alarm clock if you programmed your brain, so to say, with the same sleep time and wake time. Is that true or not?
Yeah, and so most people, if they've got some good habits and they're getting good quality sleep, usually they will kind of fall into a normal pattern. So, when we talked, you were asking me a question earlier about how, getting good quality sleep. And one thing you'll hear a lot of people say is make sure you go to bed at the same time every day. I'm going to challenge that notion a little bit because when we talk about behavioral sleep medicine and I see patients in my office who have trouble sleeping, I actually focus more on when they wake up. Okay. And why that's important is what a lot of us do is, well, if we have trouble sleeping, then we'll say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and sleep in a little extra. I'm going to sleep in and make up the difference. And that actually causes more damage than the problems of going to bed. Okay. So one of the things is we all like our habits. We like things to be, we like patterns. We like to, eat around the same time. We get up, we do some of the same things, and sleep is no different. And it's no different for our children than it is for adults. And so one of the important things is I tell people to work on trying to wake up at the same time every day. Okay. So the time you wake up, I think, is almost more critical than when you go to bed. Because if you're waking up at the same time, then your brain is naturally going to say, well, if I need 7 or 8 hours of sleep, I need to go to bed by this time every night, roughly, to get that sleep. Okay. But if you're waking up at all different times of the day, then when you go to bed is going to vary all over the place. And it's very hard to kind of create that pattern. So the kind of keeping consistency when you wake up, even on the weekends and different things, trying to keep consistent is important. And the one thing you and I haven't talked about earlier is exercise.
Yes.
Exercise is so critical for sleep,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
You talked about weight loss metabolism. We know sleep is definitely critical when it comes to weight loss metabolism. So we see patients who are dieting very well, they're working on their good eating habits, they're exercising, but they're only sleeping 4 hours a night because of work, and they're not losing the weight. Because if you don't couple that with good quality sleep, it doesn't affect your metabolism. You've been a resident and a fellow, and you've seen all of us post after a long shift and call. What do you see everyone do? They go get a donut and they get coffee, they're getting caffeine, they're getting sugar. And that's not because they're done with their shift. The brain is actually secreting chemicals that drives them to look for sugar. So we have a hormone called leptin, and leptin helps to keep our appetite down. And when you sleep well and get good sleep, that level stays very low. But if you do shift work or you don't sleep well, that level starts to go higher. So the brain tries to supplement with sugar and food to keep the brain going.
And I remember that vividly, that when you had the hardest night, you were always looking for a high carb load, whether it was the hash browns or it was everything you could find in the cafeteria all at once on your plate. And then about 20 minutes or an hour later, you were fast asleep on your notes, writing your doctor's notes.
So that's another hormone called ghrelin. So when we sleep normally, ghrelin is low. And when we don't sleep normally, that goes high. And ghrelin drives your appetite, especially for sugars and carbohydrates. So that sleep really affects that hormone balancing, definitely can affect that. But exercise has shown to really help consolidate our sleep. Okay, that physical activity, basically your body says at nighttime, I need to sleep to recover and repair from that physical activity I did. And that's where sleep rebuilds the body, helps to build the muscles and do those things. But one of the key things is you got to be careful of when you exercise. Okay, if you exercise too late, you actually can keep yourself up. So we tell people, try not to exercise within 4 or 5 hours of bed. But even, 30 minutes 3 times a week is something that just gets your heart rate up, can really make a difference, not only for mental clarity and how we do, but for sleep as well.
We talked about it on the channel in 2 separate talks. One was the 5 things which are essential for life. And the other was with regard to exercise, looking at the guidelines, looking at what it takes. And we've also talked on obesity and all that. So I'm in 110% agreement with you on this, that, all of these balances, checks and balances, that I call them, you have to institute in your life. And sometimes you will go one way or the other. Talk about something interesting in trends. Now you have all these sleep monitors, you have these watches, you have all of these devices. I would say if you go back to the basics, you probably don't need them, but the idea is, can you stimulate? And I read a very recent article on these new devices, which basically take you into a meditation or a trance, stimulate your frontal lobe, do other things. And some of them have been shown, when you look at the EEG records, to simulate some of the things you need to do. What I imagine in the future, and I think you'll agree, is when we understand the neurotransmitters well enough, we'll be able to modulate things a little better. But some of it is the brain's pathophysiology and physiology that has to be respected. And whether you have the monitors or not, they'll tell you something you already know to some degree, right? But anyway, do you see any credibility in them helping us in measuring how much you're getting, like a dashboard effect? Because I do see potential uses for them. It's just, I don't know how to interpret the data, because I think your own body will tell you if you're doing it right or not. But in some cases, you get caught up in your grind and you don't always have that. And so you need a check engine light, you need a dashboard. So what are your thoughts on that? When do people go to a sleep lab, and what sorts of conditions have you seen that are interesting? I can understand chronic insomnia or maybe sleep apnea. Is that what you treat, or is it a whole host of other things? How successful are the sleep labs in diagnosing it? And then once it's diagnosed, what modalities of treatment do you recommend?
If you like what you're hearing, hit the like button. Want to share it with all your friends, that would be great. And hit the subscribe button if you want to see more episodes from this channel. Hit the bell icon so that you can be alerted to the next one that we come up with. Thank you for joining us as always. It's always been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you again.